All right, today we're jumping into a legal case from India that, well, it pretty much turns a common belief on its head. It's all about Archana Gupta versus Rajeev Gupta. And trust me, this case gets into some really deep questions about money, marriage, and where responsibility lies. So, let's just cut to the chase. When a couple splits up, is the husband always automatically legally required to pay maintenance? I mean, what do you think? Most of us would probably nod and say, yeah, of course, but is that really always true? Well, it turns out the law has a fascinating little exception. We're talking about a law in India, Section 125 of the Criminal Procedure Code, or CrPC. And yeah, its main job is to make sure one spouse isn't left completely broke after a separation. But, and this is a big but, it's not a blank check. It all hinges on one little word: justification. Was there a good reason for walking away? And to really understand what that means, we've got to look at a real-world story. Let's dive into the case of Archana Gupta and Rajeev Gupta. Their legal battle, way back in 2009, ended up setting a major precedent that's still a huge deal in family law. Okay, so what happened here was a total classic he said, she said situation. On one side, you have the wife, Archana. She laid out some really serious allegations. We're talking drinking, gambling, adultery, a pretty grim picture. But then you have the husband, Rajeev, who's telling a totally different tale. He says, no, she left for no good reason. Her father was influencing her, and I was willing to make it work. So you can see the problem for the court, right? Two completely opposite stories. And the entire case really boils down to that law we mentioned earlier, Section 125 of the CrPC. This was the legal avenue Archana took to ask for maintenance for herself and their son. And like we said, the whole point of this law is to be a safety net, right? To make sure someone who can't support themselves isn't just left high and dry. But here comes the twist. There was this one crucial detail that came out in court. Archana wasn't actually without an income. She had a job. She was earning a monthly salary. Now, that one fact throws a huge wrench in the works because it goes right up against the main idea of Section 125, the part about being unable to maintain herself. So you've got these two totally different stories and this really important financial detail. How in the world did the court figure this out? Okay, let's break down exactly how they sifted through all of this to get to their final decision. What the court did was actually pretty smart. They boiled the whole thing down to three core questions. First, did the wife leave for a good reason? Simple enough. Second, was she genuinely unable to support herself and her son? And finally, the big one, taking all that into account, was she actually entitled to get any maintenance? And after looking at everything, the court's findings were, well, they were pretty decisive. They concluded that, one, the wife left without a sufficient cause. And, this is huge, they found her serious allegations just weren't proven. On top of that, they pointed out that yes, she was employed and could take care of herself, and that it seemed she was really acting under her father's influence. So, the moment of truth. What did the court decide? It was actually a split verdict. The son, he was awarded 2,000 rupees a month. That makes sense because a parent's duty to their child is a whole separate issue. But for the wife, Archana, the court gave her nothing. A big fat zero. No maintenance at all. So you're probably asking, why zero? How is that possible? Well, it all came down to a very specific part of the law, Section 125, subsection 4. And this little clause is a real game changer. It says, flat out, that a wife is not entitled to an allowance if she refuses to live with her husband without any sufficient reason. For Archana's case, that was basically the legal knockout punch.
Now, I know what you're thinking. This case was back in 2009. Why does it still matter today? The reason is, it set this incredibly important precedent about the relationship between rights and responsibilities in a marriage.
The Archana Gupta case basically established a few key principles that courts now follow. For one, the burden of proof is on the person who leaves to justify it. You can't just walk away, you have to show why. Two, courts have to rule on facts, not just what someone alleges. And three, if a wife is working, she has to actually prove her income isn't enough. Just being employed is a huge factor. So what's the practical takeaway here? For wives, it means you need to have solid evidence for your claims, and you have to show you're genuinely unable to support yourself. Basically, your rights come with obligations. For husbands, it means you have a legitimate defense if you can prove your wife left without a good reason, and that she is in fact self-sufficient. Things like genuine attempts to reconcile can also really matter. Ultimately, this whole case really hammers home the true purpose of Section 125. It's supposed to be a shield to protect someone from destitution. It was never meant to be a sword for someone who just decides to abandon their marriage without a legitimate, justifiable reason.
And all of this really leaves us with a much bigger, modern question, doesn't it? As our relationships and family structures keep evolving, how should the law balance that duty of care we have for a partner with our own individual responsibility? It's a tricky one for sure, and the Archana Gupta case definitely gives us a lot to think about.